All right, well, it is 11:45, so we will get this session started. I want to just start out a quick introduction. My name is Danielle Lauder. I'm the Program Director for the Northeast Telehealth Resource Center, and I will be your moderator here today for this session. And so excited to have both Courtney Hosfeld and Janine Lohman here with us today to share their expertise to some wonderful and innovative, creative work that they've been doing for quite some time, but also to share their perspectives and what they've been experiencing during the pandemic. We're going to have Courtney, we'll keep this introduction brief because we want to have her spending the vast majority of the time here. Courtney Hosfeld is a speech language pathologist too at Cincinnati Children's Hospital Medical Center. She's a full-time therapist there and works with preschool children, particularly those who have been abused, neglected, or experienced trauma. Super passionate about this focus area. And then Janine Lohman is with the University of Kentucky Communications Sciences and Disorders. Dr. Lohman is also a speech language pathologist, is associate professor in the Department of Communication Sciences and Disorders, and Janine's going to be here to help us with the Q&A session at the end to share some of her expertise. Just a couple of logistics before we dive into this awesome session. The Q&A, if you have questions, please try to use the app Q&A just because it's easier for us to track there. But if that's not quite as convenient, feel free to chat and I'll just copy and paste those questions over into the Q&A. We have a relatively a smaller group, so when we open up to Q&A a little bit later, we can also unmute and share cameras with folks to make it a little bit more personal. So I think with that, we are going to go ahead and turn it over to our experts, and they're going to tell us about outpatient speech therapy telepractice at Cincinnati Children's. Welcome, Courtney. Welcome, Janine. Thank you so very much for being with us, and thank you all for joining. And without further ado, let's get started.
All right. Thank you very much for that introduction. So like she said, I'm going to talk a little bit about our outpatient speech therapy telepractice program that we've been doing at Cincinnati Children's Hospital. I'm going to talk both about what we did pre-COVID and what we've done since the COVID pandemic has been going on, so how that's changed. So I just want to start by giving an overview of what we have at Cincinnati Children's Hospital to support telehealth. We actually have a center for telehealth that's in the main hospital. That was launched in 2013 and opened the physical location in 2014. And since then, they've been progressing. We've had a lot of different divisions get in with telehealth and start up their telehealth programs. This chart was actually made pre-COVID, so we have even more going on now. But you can kind of see here how we've progressed, and most recently in 2020, we just launched our Cincy Kids Health Connect app. So that's a direct-to-consumer platform where the patient can log into an app and see a doctor or a specialist on demand through the app. So that's been exciting. That launched, I believe, right at the beginning of COVID, maybe a little bit before. So our Center for Telehealth has been extremely busy. And this is just a couple of numbers to throw out there. This again was pre-COVID. This visual was created. So pre-COVID, they were seeing about 2,000 video visits annually. That's hospital-wide. They had over 40 specialty clinics doing telehealth, over 5,000 diagnostic testing sessions per year. We had some remote patient monitoring going on. And then most recently, our ECHO model, which is Extension for Community Health Outcomes. And it's a telehealth-based learning for primary care providers. So again, this is all our work that in the hospital-wide, what we've been doing pre-COVID. So then we're kind of had to dive in quickly to telehealth with the COVID pandemic. And this chart just kind of outlines what we were doing before and what we are doing now during the midst of the COVID pandemic. So I'm talking about speech pathology specifically. So over here on the left chart, you'll see the orange is ambulatory, and that's where we fall under. So a year ago, in July 2019, we had 79 telehealth visits in the month of July. Fast forward a year during this pandemic, and in May, we had over 10,000 telehealth visits. So huge jump in the past year, and especially over the past few months of getting our providers on board with telehealth and getting those visits set up. And then the chart on the right is very shocking and surprises me, but also, I'm not surprised at the same time with how we had to adapt to telehealth so quickly. So on the left here, we have pre-COVID. We looked at July 2019 to February 2020. And hospital-wide, we had 1,730 visits, telehealth visits completed. And then we have our post-COVID or during COVID numbers from March 2020 to May 2020, and we jumped up to just under 59,000 telehealth visits. So like I said, our Center for Telehealth has been extremely busy, extremely helpful to us all during this time. So I want to kind of talk about speech specific, what we've been doing before COVID and during COVID. So I talked a little bit about hospital-wide, and now I want to dive into what I specifically do. So I'm our telepractice lead in our Division of Speech Language Pathology at Cincinnati Children's. And before COVID, we were really looking at ways to introduce telehealth into the hospital. Our biggest barrier in Ohio was insurance coverage. So we were not being reimbursed, and patients' insurance was not covering telehealth speech pathology sessions. So we had to kind of find a way to introduce telehealth and try it out with families to see if it would work, to see if it would be more effective or as effective as in person. So luckily we had a fund through the hospital called the Gabriel Fund. And through that fund, they were able to cover 10 30-minute weekly sessions for patients. And the way we recruited those patients mainly was from our denied insurance list. So those patients who got speech and language evaluations, their insurance didn't cover therapy, then we would reach out to them and say, would you like to try telehealth and see, and no cost to you. So we wanted to look at 4 years and older because we wanted this telehealth program to be kind of direct patient care. So we wanted the patient to be interacting with us on a computer, on a device in their homes with the speech therapist. So we looked at articulation and language disorders mainly, and we used the Zoom platform for this. And then our other project that was going on pre-COVID, we were part of a nationwide research study on Fragile X. And our therapists in that program, they did more of parent training. So it was patients diagnosed with Fragile X, and our speech therapists were coaching the parent via telehealth. So they would get on a session together. They would just talk to the parent. The patient wouldn't be involved at this point. And they would explain, some skills to use, how to target their goals. Then they would get on a session and they would use a Bluetooth headset. So the parent is wearing a Bluetooth earpiece, and the SLP is wearing a Bluetooth earpiece, and they're communicating that way. So that way the patient isn't seeing the therapist, isn't hearing the therapist. Only the parent is getting coached through his or her ear, which was very naturalistic, and they were able to play at home without the kid even knowing that there was another person on the other end. So that again was more, the kid wasn't sitting at a computer with the therapist, it was more coaching the parent on the skills to use. And then COVID came and we had to increase our telehealth dramatically. So just a little bit of numbers for you on the calendar. On March 17th, that day was when we canceled all in-person therapy sessions. So in our whole division, we had the only time we were allowing in-person visits was if it was very medically necessary. So maybe feeding visits or something that was that they really needed to still continue the therapy for. All other sessions were canceled. And then that over the next few weeks, we had to brainstorm how we were gonna do this telehealth, what platform we were gonna use, how we were gonna train all of our SLPs, how we were gonna figure out if our patients and families had the equipment they needed. So really that week of March 23rd, the SLPs took the time to call their families and say, would you be interested in telehealth? This is what it is. This is what you need. So we could get an idea of how many people would actually want this. So then quickly, and I actually was looking back on this and I was finishing this slide, and I can't believe how quickly we did. It seemed like it was weeks before we got started. But on March 30th, we began mainly to see audio-only telehealth visits, so without video, just over the phone. And a couple of our therapists were starting to use video telehealth visits already less than 2 weeks after we canceled in person. So it was pretty incredible how much our therapists just dove in and tried and attempted it without fearing technology and trying to figure out what platform to use and all of that. So currently we're still using our telehealth. It is still the payers are still covering it right now in Ohio during COVID pandemic. But we're also ramping up our in-person again. So our in-person sessions are with precautions, so masks, shields, face shields, and keeping distance. So not ideal for speech therapy, but that's why we're lucky we can still continue our telehealth during this time. So these are just a few numbers about a couple, 4 different random weeks that I pulled out. The first week in that chart, March 11th, highlighted in yellow, that was right before we canceled all in-person. So you can see the number of in-person visits we saw that week was 700, which is actually a lot less than what we typically see. And I think even during that week, people were hesitant to come in with the COVID pandemic beginning around that time. So we were still allowing in person, but we didn't see as much as we usually do. So 700 in-person visits during that week and 3 telehealth visits. And those 3 telehealth visits were actually from our previous Gabriel Fund that we were still continuously doing. So it wasn't until that week of March 30th where we really started those telehealth visits. So that number, 403, most of those were audio visits, audio telehealth. It wasn't until April when we were doing all of our video telehealth visits. Like I said, it took a couple weeks to train all of our SLPs on how to use the platform and how to use telehealth in general for speech and language therapy. So brings us to June 1st. That's when we started kind of introducing in-person again, but you can see our telehealth visit number is still pretty high, and it's consistently staying high right now. And then just at the bottom, they're talking about our volume. So in April, we saw about 50% of what we would typically see in person. So that was a big loss for us. And that was when we were we canceled all our in-person. We were trying to get those telehealth visits started. So I'm actually proud of our division, and I'm surprised that we got to even 50 with how quickly we had to change. And then May, we were up to 75% of our visits. And then a couple weeks ago, the 22nd, we were up to 89% of our typical volume. Our goal for July 30th was 100%. And I actually just received an email this morning that we hit our scheduling goal for next week, that we're 100% scheduled. So it was pretty impressive how quickly we got this going. I'm sure a lot of you can relate in your jobs how telehealth had to pick up quickly and you just had to adapt. This is another just comparison of numbers. I took 10 weeks in a row, and you can see how our in-person visits were very low at the beginning, and now they're starting to ramp back up. But our telehealth visits really, got into the 600s and 700s, and they're kind of staying there right now. So that tells us that our families are liking this way of therapy. They're continuing it. They're wanting to continue in the future. That last week is a little bit lower because it was 4th of July and we didn't have any visits that day. So just talking a little bit about how we trained our therapists for telehealth, I joked with a colleague that I felt like Goldilocks during this time. We had 3 platforms, and we had to decide what's going to work best for speech and language therapy. How are we going to make it interactive if we're doing that direct patient care model? So some were too expensive, some didn't have enough features. We had to go through all the logistics of that, and it was pretty tough to decide, but our hospital-wide ended up kind of pushing towards Teams. So that's what most of our therapists use now. Jabber, we had access to accounts right away, so we quickly got up and running with Jabber, and our inpatient therapists mainly were using that. So they didn't need to screen share or share screen. They were just, the nurse would set up a device in the patient's room so that the speech language pathologist could remote in to those inpatient rooms. So that's something we weren't doing before COVID. We didn't do any telehealth inpatient. So that was new. We also introduced speech and language evaluations through telehealth. That's something we weren't doing pre-COVID. So we had to really, we had a team that worked on that, and how are we gonna utilize our testing resources and put them online. So actually a speech and language test developer, Pearson Assessments, created a Q Global. So it's an online platform for their tests, which we were able to get an account to and sign in. And then our stimulus books were online and available to us. So that's been very helpful. It is a little bit difficult to do receptive language. So a lot of our receptive language tasks are pointing, and we obviously can't see that on the end of the patient. So we had to be creative. One time I had a caregiver log into the meeting on their phone as well as on the computer, and mom stood behind the patient with her phone pointed at the camera, so I could see on her phone view what he was pointing to. So we had to be very creative. It's not the best way, but I was happy we were able to do some evaluations that way. So now we'll get into my favorite part of the presentation, which is just seeing some videos of how it works, how we do therapy a couple of different ways. So you'll see 2 4-year-olds with just articulation, a 6-year-old with a language disorder, an 8-year-old with dyslexia, and then a couple videos from our Fragile X study, which shows the parent coaching side of things. So I personally have been doing mostly direct patient care. I've had a few birth to 3 that I'm doing parent coaching with, but for my older kids who can sit at the computer or at the device, I'm doing kind of a mix of ways to engage them. So I have real live objects that I use, and I'll just point my camera down and we'll play together. Or, I'll pull real life objects out of a hat or out of a bag and do some descriptions, guessing what's in my bag. So I'll use real life objects, and I was kind of surprised at how many kids just want you to play and will tell you what to do to play. So that's been fun. And then we also use, a lot of speech and language therapists have taken it upon themselves to create materials, digital materials, and share them or sell them on different platforms. So there's a website called boomlearning.com, and it's similar to Teachers Pay Teachers, where it's all online digital materials that you can buy and use right on your computer. Another one that I've used is called Simply Digital SLP, and she takes a lot of board games and transfers them onto an online format. And then I'll just also use regular kids websites like pbskids.org, nickjr.com. And then there's also a website called getepic.com that has online books, so you can read stories online. So we have to be creative. Oh, and my favorite part I didn't even touch on is green screen therapy. So for those who haven't heard of using a green screen on Zoom, if you set up your background to have a green background, so I use green felt, and you can customize your background to show that you're on a beach, or that you're in the jungle or something like that. And then we've put a green pocket over the background, so you can reach in, and I'll show a video of this, but you can reach in like a basket or a bucket and pull something out. And it looks like, and Janine's pulling it up now with her background. Thank you. Perfect examples. So we've gotten really creative, and that's how we keep the kids engaged. And I actually have my green screen on the floor right now, but it's just felt, and I hang it up behind me with some hooks. So let's get into some videos. This is Ada, and she's a 4-year-old that's working on articulation. She was one of my first Gabriel Fund patients, so my videos got progressively better as I got more into telehealth, so I apologize for the quality, but you can see how we use just an online spinner to target some of her articulation.
Press on there.
You press the button. Press on your screen.
Press on my thing and press it on there.
Yeah, click on there. There you go. Now click the spin button. Nice job! You're spinning it! And stop! What did you land on?
And then dump.
Oh, yeah. Now let's open our mouth real big and say, gum.
Gum.
Oh, perfect! Okay, click on your screen again and click the spin button.
So for this video, I was giving her control of the screen. This is what I love about Zoom. We were easily able to do that. When we switched over to Teams, we've had some issues with that. But if the patient is on a PC or laptop and downloads the app, we can also do this on Teams. So she's a 4-year-old and she was able to manipulate the mouse and move it around and click. She needed mom's help in the beginning for this, but then she was able to do it on her own. So some patients that can't do that, I'll just spin it for them and I'll tell them, tell me when to spin, tell me when to stop, so we can still make it interactive that way. All right, so the next one is Allison, and she was a little bit older. She's working on more higher level language. So you'll see in this video, I'm using real live objects like I talked about earlier, and she's still very engaged with it. Oops, go back.
So let's start.
Yeah.
Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay, the first one I have is something you find in your house that helps you go up or down.
Stairs.
Oh, perfect. And you kept that snake behind the fence. Stairs.
Whoa.
Perfect. Look at those.
That doesn't look like stairs.
There it goes. Here goes the next one.
Okay.
This is an animal that you could find at the zoo or the jungle, and it has stripes.
Wait, we can know.
What is it?
Tiger.
Oh, you are so close. So this one is black and white stripes. And it kind of looks like a horse.
Zebra.
Oh, you're right. Let me hear you say it again.
Zebra.
Good. So
All right, so again, that was just using manipulatives that I had at my house, real life objects, pulling it out of a bag. And another thing I want to note with Allison is we got a lot of good descriptive language out of her just by talking about what was in her house, what was behind her, what was in the background. And she loved it. She loved talking about her house, her siblings that would walk by. So really, I was worried about our rapport and relationship that I would establish over the computer. But I found that most of the time it's more than even in person because they're more comfortable in their own homes. So this is Allison again, and this is a different way we did things. This is a sheet I would normally print off in person, and we would role play and I would read them out loud to her. So I just did the same thing on telehealth. I didn't screen share this, so this is just what I'm seeing on my screen. I covered my face up. And I'm going to read from this document to her, but she's only seeing me still. She's not seeing the document.
of Sam on the stop sign in my neighborhood, and I think I might have found him. Does he have a red collar? Yes, he was playing in the water near my house, and I brought him inside. So, Allie, who is Sam?
Is like a person like a lot of people know.
Well, do you think a person would have a collar?
No, it has to be like a dog.
Oh, you're right. So maybe it's a dog. And what happened to Sam?
So she jumped into like someone's pool. Then someone got out and like just put him in the house.
Oh, that's right. Do you think that wasn't their dog, or do you think maybe Sam got lost?
Maybe like Sam got lost, or like someone just maybe he got his his leash off with his collar.
Good thinking. Okay.
All right, so we did a lot of inferencing work with her on that one. So our next one, you'll see my video quality is getting a little bit better. I found out how to record better, so hopefully you can hear this a little bit better. Ian has dyslexia, and in person I would use colored blocks, and we would manipulate sounds and words that way. So we talk about the beginning, middle, and end sound. So to try to mimic that activity, but on telehealth, I used this in Paint, and I used it with 3D blocks. And we at first had him move it, but he was having a little bit of trouble selecting it and moving it. So I ended up just moving it for him, and he talked me through it.
Mm-hmm.
The red one.
Oh, wait, we're talking about up here in our word. Which one do I have to move first?
What's the different sound? Is it at the end?
The first one.
Let's see. Bed and bet. I hear the same B sound in the first one. So that blue is going to stay the same. How about the middle sound? Bed and bet. Those sound like eh. So those are going to stay the same. What about the last sound? Bed and bet. Are those different or the same?
Different?
Yeah. So what block do I have to take out?
The yellow.
The yellow. So right now that yellow block is making a D sound. What color do we want to move up there to make the T sound?
The red one.
Red one. All right. So we start out with bed. Now we have B. T. What word do we have there?
Bet.
Yeah, say it fast now.
Bet.
Bet. That's right. So what's the first sound in that word?
Bet.
First sound.
Yes, B. What's the last sound in bet? Yeah, awesome job. All right.
So I like this video because you can hear Mom in the background. She's sitting to the side of them and helping him out. And what I love about telehealth too is the parents have taken more control and lead in the session and trying to help them through when they're sitting next to them in their house. I found in my therapy room, the parents kind of sit back and let me do a lot of it, and they don't feel comfortable taking the lead a lot of times. And I've noticed with telehealth, the parents will jump in and try to help and prompt them. And then that way at the end, I can say, Mom, I love how you use this prompt for Ian to help with this sound. That was a great job. Or try this prompt next time. So when we find our parents involved more, we find the carryover quicker because they're doing it in their own homes and they're carrying it over, you know, even without me on the computer with them. So again, I talk about that naturalistic environment. It's very natural. They're in their own homes. So we've really seen parents step up a lot. All right, this is Ian again, and we use Paint again for this session, and we're just gonna sort some sounds together.
We're going to sort. It's going to take all the words that end in G. G, G, G. And our blue box is going to take all the words that start with K. So I'm going to do the first one. The first one is dog. And that one ends in G. So I'm going to put it in the pink box.
The cat.
All right. Where should the cat go?
Blue box.
In the blue box. Why should the cat go in the blue box?
Because it's a C.
And what sound, though? Yeah, because the kangaroo starts with a K, but it's still the same sound, different letter.
So this is a activity I just created very quickly myself in Paint, but these are a lot of similar activities, like I said, that a lot of speech and language pathologists have been creating themselves and sharing free or sharing for a low cost on some websites. So super easy to do and still interactive. All right, and this is kind of a switch into our parent coaching. Again, what I love about this is the child has no idea that the speech pathologist is talking to mom. You'll see mom's little Bluetooth headset. I do apologize, this video is a little bit lower quality and kind of skips around, but you'll still be able to hear the speech pathologist pretty clearly and in what she's coaching the mom to do.
You get most of the materials and just give him one that he has to match at a time with you.
You got to count them. Stop. Count them.
He's trying to play.
Okay. All right. Let's count our dots. Ready?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
8. Stop. Okay, let's.
And then you can just kind of hold up which two, and you can say what color that the 8's on. Some of them are blue.
You found the blue.
Perfect.
Okay, hold on a minute here.
Asking the work of the
Yeah.
How many apples there?
All right, let's go. Okay. Okay. Go on this one. Ready? Let's count them. All right, let's start the beginning.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Let's see if we can find the 10 ice cream coating.
I want number 10.
I want number 10. Number purple number 10.
The purple.
Yeah, you don't know what color that one is. Okay, hold on. Okay, can you? My goodness.
All right, so a little bit hard to hear, but I like that part at the end where the SLP said, I want number 10, was modeling that for mom to model. So then mom modeled it, I want number 10, and then he said it right then, I want number 10. So again, I really love this model and this way of doing it. It makes the parents the lead, and it makes them turn into the therapist. So a lot of the times we'll get into the office in person and they'll say, this is great, but I can't carry this over at home. He doesn't listen, he doesn't pay attention. So this is a way to get in their homes and to watch them in their natural environment, see them playing on the bed, and coach right through that, how to work on those skills. So really effective. The study has had some great success. So this is another example from that study. This patient has an AAC device that he's using. The therapist that did this session had trouble with the AAC device. She couldn't ever see the buttons. So she was more so still coaching mom, but she said she didn't love this way of doing AAC therapy because she couldn't see it. So this was pre-COVID, and then during COVID, we had an AAC team who was really trying to improve this way of therapy. And we found that if we use document cameras and we set up our AAC device in our office and mirror it to the family, we can show them and train them how to use it a little bit better. So we're always looking at ways to improve that.
Do you want more, or are you done? You want more? Yeah. Tell Mama. I want.
I want more chocolate milk to drink.
You're so lucky. I would drink chocolate milk and have another fat roll.
All right, so sorry that video again was a little bit choppy, but he was requesting milk using his AAC device. And the SLP was just expanding on that and telling mom to say, I want chocolate milk. I want more chocolate milk. All right, this is our last video that I'm going to show. This is the most exciting for me because I just, again, started using green screen. And this is how it looks in telehealth sessions. And then the next video will show how it works because actually my friend Charlie here was really intrigued and wanted to know. So I showed him and recorded it to see as well.
Yeah.
Ooh, he said that was so delicious. Yummy. Okay, I think we have 3 more fish in case Mr. Bear is hungry. So our next word to say in order for him to get a fish is
Chocolate.
yeah. So let's make that really big silly face. Chocolate.
Chocolate.
Good. Do you like chocolate?
What?
Do you like chocolate?
Yeah, so my babysitter has a really big thing of gum and chocolate, but I'm going to say what a big thing of gum. Can I go get it? My dad said I can't go get it.
How about this? How about, can you remember next time, before you log on, will you bring it with you and then you can show me next time at the beginning?
Uh-huh.
Awesome. All right, so chocolate was our word. Here comes another fish. Ooh, that fish looks like he has whiskers.
Catfish!
Oh, catfish! Very good. Now, the catfish that I found for Mr. Bear was really small, but usually catfish are pretty big. So do you think Mr. Bear would like a catfish? Yeah, let's feed it to him. Here goes, down the gullet. Ooh.
All right, so that video, it was a little bit longer, but I liked how in the middle of it, he said, oh, my babysitter has this big container of chocolate in the other room. So a lot of my kids are making associations, again, with things in their house, in their natural environment. So this is a video of how this green screen works.
There's mouth. Everyone to know my secrets, but I'll tell you today since you asked. So on this program, I can stop sharing my background. So if I have no background, this is in my house. This is what's behind me. This is my wall, and it's green. And see this right here? This is a pocket. So this is where I put all the fish, but it looks like it was the bear's mouth. So let me show you again. When I bring up the bear, his mouth is right where my pocket is. But this is called a green screen. And when it's green, it does look kind of like a magic trick. So do you remember how you saw my fish floating? The way I did that was I put him on my green stick. So the green, again, is magic. So it looked like he was floating, but I was really holding him on a stick.
All right, and one great thing about speech language pathologists is we all love to share ideas. So I got a lot of my ideas by joining the professional Facebook groups. And there's a therapist named Serena who's created a whole business now selling some green screen felt things, felt pieces, felt pockets. Her company's Play Sparks Toys. So it's just been wonderful to see speech therapists all across the country sharing ideas and materials. So it's been really fun. So I just want to wrap up with talking about some logistics and positives and negatives that we've run across. We're lucky at Cincinnati Children's. We have an in-house IS team that works specifically with telehealth. So any technological issues that the family has, we can have them call our Center for Telehealth and they will work them through that. They also help them get set up in the beginning on their devices as well. I talked a little bit about this already. I just really like the family elements of telehealth. My parents are always with the patient during the sessions. They're taking on more of a lead role. Also, I see siblings in the session a lot. In-person sessions, we have the siblings wait with the caregiver in an observation room, and that takes away the caregiver's ability to show us the skills that they use with the kid at home because they're watching the other kids. So at home, the siblings can be playing in the other room, or they can even join and play with the patient together. So I think that's improved as well. And our parent surveys have been very positive. I apologize for the small font here, but I really wanted to put full quotes in there. So we got some great feedback saying it's an easy system to use. A lot of our parents would use telehealth going forward. One parent said we couldn't ask for better, so engaging, and the therapist really seems to enjoy what she does, perfect experience. A lot of them liked the idea, but some did have some difficulty with lag time, working on speech or articulation. And then one parent commented on a specific app that wasn't working well. And then she said if we could click on a link to get straight to the platform, that's what we would like. And that's kind of what we move towards with teams. They just click a link and open the program that way. So here's some feedback from our SLPs. They all have loved it. They were really hesitant at the beginning, especially ones that weren't used to technology. But I have to give my SLPs kudos at Cincinnati Children's Hospital because they've just done an incredible amount of work in a few months on getting this up and running. So I like this first one. This SLP said she started to see, I think it was a 2-year-old in person before COVID, and then had to move her sessions to telehealth sessions. And then she was actually able to discharge her because she saw her doing these skills in the home and not in the therapy room. And grandma was able to take more of the lead and be like the therapist in the home with her. And she just made great progress. And this SLP said she wished she could have a telehealth visit for all of these young kids to see them in action in their own homes instead of just in their therapy room. This next one said during an evaluation, the children's language and play was more realistic because it was in their typical environment. Again, in our therapy rooms in person, it takes a while for kids to warm up. And then the nature of telehealth is encouraging parents to take on more as a self-management role and take on more for their child's care. And then this last one said fewer reinforcements are needed, resulting in more productive but shorter sessions, which is more time and cost effective for the family. And for us as an organization, we started doing 30-minute sessions. In person, we usually do 60-minute sessions because we were noticing we didn't have to clean up toys, we didn't have to switch over to activities, all that stuff that took time to walk back to the room, clean it up. And that wasn't there for telehealth. We were able to get a ton of work done in a shorter amount of time. So just to finish up here with some positives and areas to improve, I pretty much talked about all of our positives, but there's improvement, huge improvement in carryover with patient comfortable in their own home. Rapport is easier for me to establish. I felt more connected because the kids were opening up more. You know, a lot of my kids in person would come and think into my office at the hospital, think I was a doctor there to give them a shot. So when they can just see a face on the other end and they're comfortable in their homes, I saw them open up more. Many children are using technology now. They're motivated by it. Parents practice more at home because they're seeing their child do the activities in their home. No cleanup. You can use toys that are in the patient's home as well. And then we've had a lot of great parent and patient satisfaction. So our biggest area to improve would be for insurance coverage for this. Because if it wasn't for COVID pandemic right now, we wouldn't be able to reimburse our sessions and be able, and I'm sure people wouldn't want to self-pay just to have this option. So that's our biggest barrier. Other barriers are with technology, trial and error with laptops, tablets. Articulation of voice might not sound as clear. The voice quality or the lighting, the patient's Wi-Fi could affect the therapy as well. And then one more thing I wanted to touch on is licensure. For speech language pathology, we can only see patients in the states that we're licensed in. So a lot of our in-person therapy appointments at Cincinnati Children's, we come from Indiana, Kentucky, West Virginia, even Tennessee will come see us. So we couldn't serve those patients with telehealth because some of our therapists aren't licensed in West Virginia or Tennessee. I have my license in Kentucky and Ohio, so I can see both. I can see a patient in Kentucky from their home, but I couldn't see a patient who was in Indiana from their home. So our national organization is working through a licensure compact to try to make that easier for our therapists to get cross-licensed, but that's areas for the future to improve. And then our future at Cincinnati Children's, this is obviously going to change a lot now since COVID, but we're going to start offering telepractice as another satellite option. And satellite option just means another way or another location. So we have locations all around Cincinnati. When we ask in the evaluation, what's your preferred location, what are you closest to? And we're just going to add telepractice as another option. And then our Cincy Kids Health Connect app, what I talked about earlier, that's going to improve. And then there's talks about getting speech therapy or at least an evaluation through that app, so you can log in and find a therapist to talk to about concerns or to get an evaluation. But that is all much in the future and stuff to look forward to. All right, I know I talked quickly at the end there, but just wanted to make sure I got everything in. So that is all I have to say. If there's questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Wonderful. Like, how amazing. And thanks for sharing all of that, Courtney, and just the creativity involved and, you know, kind of on the fly, figuring out what works best for your patients and families and some of the great outcomes that you're seeing. You know, some silver linings, right? With the pandemic, we've got to find some. But awesome. So we don't have any specific questions in the Q&A at this moment, but I'm actually going to go ahead and click on everybody who's with us because we have, you know, a nice small group. So it's easy for us to kind of.
Danielle, do you want me to stop sharing?
Yeah, if you'd like to, then we can kind of see everybody a little bit bigger. Yeah, perfect. Awesome. So, oh, we've got a little bit of an echo. Okay, now it seems to be gone. So if folks would like to unmute themselves, and you can share your video as well if you'd like to, we'd love to hear from you with questions or even just comments. I'm pretty amazed by all of this and the creativity, and I was psyched that you were able to show, I can't remember, it wasn't Ian, but the one that was super intrigued with how it all worked. I'm like, ooh, there's a little engineer in the making or something.
Right, yeah, he was really into it.
I just want to make one or two comments to piggyback on Courtney's wonderful presentation. More of dealing with licensure and that type of thing for that. Is one, with reimbursement, check your state because reimbursement varies by state. So in some states like Kentucky, our Medicaid in any insurance provider in our state has to reimburse for telehealth. So please check individual states and make sure it's for speech language pathology because your state might say that they reimburse, but it's for physicians. So you'll just want to check that. The other thing is Courtney did a beautiful job about talking about licensure. Just to piggyback, because these are things that could get you in trouble, right? They don't care about what you're doing in therapy. It's, are you abiding by? Check your Practice Act, because your Practice Act will tell you how they define telehealth. Like in some states, it can be store and forward. It has to be video conferencing. It can be remote patient monitoring. It can be mobile health. Other states say it has to be real time. Other states will say that you cannot start a new provider-patient relationship via tele, that it has to be done in person. So it just varies by state. So I would just really caution you to check your state's Practice Act to make sure you're in accordance with that. And then, as Courtney beautifully described, wherever your patient is where you must be licensed right now, because we do not have interstate compact. And so not only will you have to abide by the rules in your state for telehealth, but also where your patient is. So you'll want to know the Practice Acts for those states also. And then we just did get, last night it came in that we need 10 states to sign on for the Practice Act for interstate compact. We've had 6 now, so we need 4 more to sign on. Georgia just signed on there. And I do need to say, in full disclosure for anybody that's an SLP here, I am coordinator of SIG 18 telepractice for ASHA. I should have said that at the beginning, so I'm just going to say that in full disclosure for that. But that was beautiful. Courtney, I just wanted to piggyback to make people aware to look at those things also, because those are the things that'll get you in trouble. Not using the green screen and that type of thing.
Yeah. And I think those are clearly those skill sets to make this a high quality interactive visit. Those to me are what is super, super important. And, you're seeing preferences with some of your families for the televisits. However, as Jonine said, the legal and regulatory, unfortunately, we have to be thinking about that all the time. So the telehealth resource centers, I'm not sure if any of the states in the Northeast, we cover New England, New York, and New Jersey, if they're part of that SLP compact, but if they're not, would encourage you to reach out, and I'm sure we can help connect you with the right folks. I know there's a lot of strong interest in this region. And then as far as the Mid-Atlantic folks, I'm guessing there's probably some states that are already part of that compact. So 10, that's not so bad. It took us quite a few months and years to get some of the other compacts up and running. Nursing compact has been in place for years and years and years. And it's not just about telehealth. Certainly it helps expedite telehealth and decrease the administrative burden, which are all the outcomes that we're looking for. But we have seen a trend toward lots of different disciplines looking at compacts with this pandemic because, right, we really weren't prepared. And while there have been some emergency waivers under the public health emergency, it'd be great if we were better prepared the next time around and have these types of things in place so that we wouldn't have to kind of be reactive versus proactive. So would anybody like to unmute and ask any questions? I see my new friend Deborah Graham is on with us that I met.
Yes, can you hear me?
We sure can.
And I don't have a question, and I work in geriatrics, so I have very little other than Courtney. What a fabulous job! And
thank you.
I love the as in long-term care, what I try and talk to our providers about is that website manner, and just what an exciting thing. And my children are no longer at home either, but what an advantage to those parents to not have to miss a day's work or transport or and would you, in a perfect world, Courtney, would you like a 50-50 remote and in person, or how often would you think at this point with your experience that you would really like to maybe, or do you think it's necessary for them to actually come in your clinic?
That's a great question. And I think our therapists, we have over 100 at Cincinnati Children's Hospital, and they all specialize in different areas. I would say some would say for their patients, this is not a good idea. But I think you have to decide who's good for this and who's not. Right now, I am doing about 50-50 and I love it. I think it's wonderful. I think I'm becoming more creative on the computer and virtually. So I would prefer like a 75% telehealth, but again, you have to look at each patient and whether they're appropriate or not. Some examples of ones that I said, we agreed, myself and the caregiver, that it wasn't working, were those ones who had a little bit challenging behaviors of staying within the video camera. And we did do parent coaching. They weren't in the video camera, but it got to a certain point where we needed to move to an in-person session so I could see what the patient was actually doing and what skills they had. Another thing Janine and I were talking about before this was when the patients can see themselves on the camera. I know she said she's had some instances where kids react poorly to that, or they're kind of triggered by that. And we've worked around ways, like I said, we said to put a Post-it on where the patient's pictures, like the caregiver can put a patient over their screen so that they don't see it as much. But little things like that you wouldn't think of until you experience them. So definitely it's not for everyone yet. I hope it gets there, but I still am a big proponent of it for sure.
Are you supplying the devices, or did they have their own?
Good question. So for our Gabriel Fund, we had a limited amount of resources available through our Center for Telehealth, where we could supply a Wi-Fi hotspot. We could supply a laptop or an iPad if they didn't have it. But once we opened it up to everyone, we weren't able to provide that. So during COVID, once we talk to our families and say, are you interested in this, we have to then ask, do you have a device? Do you have Wi-Fi capabilities? So we unfortunately aren't able to provide that. For the Fragile Act study, we did provide the Bluetooth headsets for them.
Gotcha. And way out in Kentucky, I'm the Tennessee graduate. If I was on video, Jonine, I'm going to pull my big torchbearer up. So, but what was your remote area broadband issues? We're having that in Florida with our long-term care.
In Kentucky, it varies, and I'll tell you honestly, I was kind of surprised at some of the counties we've been able to get into that everybody, because they're in that Appalachian swath, would say they don't have internet. And so honestly, I've been kind of surprised at how many families had sufficient internet for video conferencing. And we do have families that don't. So I guess I was just surprised based on what everybody would lead you to believe. We do have a lot that use hotspots and extenders to maximize their internet for that. Most of our families have had appropriate devices. We do screen for that to make sure that they have an appropriate device so we can do quality therapy. We don't do cell phones. You know, that's just not something we do because even though a lot of the laws have been waived, like CMS has waived a lot of rules, HHS for HIPAA have waived a lot and said you can pretty much use any video conferencing except for TikTok, Facebook. We just still do the best practice. And so we don't use that. And there is some research out there to say that for children, the size of the screen does matter for learning. And so I do want to say real quick, a plug there is the International Journal for Telerehabilitation. International Journal for Telerehabilitation is free. It's open source. They do OT, PT, ST, but they have some really nice articles on like, are you HIPAA compliant, and a checklist. They'll have research out there. So I just wanted to give a plug for that at places to look. Because Deb, we did do a study with deaf and hard of hearing families. And we found that before age 3, for children that were cochlear implanted, they wanted in person. They did not want tele. It could be a supplement. And this is pre-COVID, right? So I think that feeling would probably still stand. But at 3 and later, then they wanted a 3-1. They wanted 3 times tele, 1 time in person. That was their preferred schedule, and that's what kept coming up in this research study. So I think Courtney brings up a good point about looking at your client, but I also think as we get more research, we can maybe start providing some guidelines to therapists out there, knowing that it's still going to always be individualized. Yeah, our geriatric, we work with prisons, so I deliver services to inmates at a federal medical center. So they're pretty much geriatric on the whole, and they love it. They love working with us and getting services that way and working on communication skills.
Awesome.
And it was International Journal. Could you repeat for me?
Yeah, International Journal of Telerehabilitation. So that one is open source, and I know that's difficult to find because there are many telemedicine journals out there. And then, of course, if you're a member of ASHA, your SIGs have the different perspectives. And so there is SIG 18 with telepractice, and we have a journal that publishes articles.
It's really exciting to see just even the new literature that's coming out too. And I think, as you had mentioned, Janine, that a lot more with respect to effective utilization and specific use cases and considerations, now that a lot more people are interested because they need to be, right? With the pandemic, there's been some really interesting literature coming out lately. So good. Well, we are at 12:45. I just want to give a really quick plug to please go back into the app and fill out your evaluation. It's really short and quick for those who haven't had a chance to do that for past sessions. We kept it as short and succinct as possible, but it really helps us not only for topic areas or just the delivery mechanisms. Did you like this particular format? Would really appreciate your feedback so that we can continue to improve these virtual events for you. I want to say thank you so much again to both Courtney and Janine. This was awesome. The creativity is just amazing, and the amount of telehealth that you've been able to quickly transition to over the past few months is nothing short of incredible. Thank you everybody who was able to join us for the session, and I hope you all stay well and safe and have a great Friday and a great weekend, and thanks very much again.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye all.